It is the Anfield Wrap. Neil Atkinson with Jamie Webster, Ian Ryan and Josh Sexton. We're going to get stuck into Michael Edwards. What he's got left to do, e.g. contract, but not just that. Steven Gerrard and the story so far this season, comparing to previous seasons under Jurgen Klopp, but also when this league has been dominated by sides like Antonio Conte's Chelsea and Pep Guardiola's Manchester City. I'll have a look at all of that, but we will start off talking about Michael Edwards and his decision to leave. He wrote a very, very, very long open letter. Ian, are you taking it all at face value?
I think so. Sometimes, I mean,
it's a bit rude not to, isn't it, Jamie?
Yeah. You know, when someone's gone through those lengths, like, do you know what I mean? It's it definitely comes as a surprise to me. Like, you know what I mean? It's
yeah.
I don't really know where to go, what other to say other than let him get the jobs done first.
I like Rob Gutman's take.
Well, Rob Gutman's was very conspiratorial.
It was very...
sound like Rob.
Yeah.
Humour Rob.
Conspiracy theories all over the place. So.
What was his take on it?
His take was just more, there's always more to these things than meets the eye. Now, where we actually ended up was a closer middle. Like, I was a bit like, well, he might have decided he doesn't want to go through doing it all again. And he might have decided, you know, the idea that the manager's getting off, and he might have decided it's going to be hard to maintain the excellent record. And Rob was like, yeah, that's exactly what I mean. And I'm like, well, he sort of suggests a lot of that, I'd say, within the letter. Just a bit like, I feel like change is important to you. And I think the letter, that's the bit that I thought was most interesting about the letter. He feels that change is important for himself as much as anyone else. Yeah,
and he's probably looking at, if you want to talk about legacies and stuff, he'll know he's performed, certainly since Jurgen's been there, to a really high level in terms of what's come into the club, the outgoings as well. And maybe there is a little bit of a, well, I've done as much as I can and I want to leave a legacy, and I don't know how long this goes on for. So if I'm going to go out, let's go out on the top. And I think he's doing that. But Rob's point around maybe there's always a little bit more to it. I can kind of get on board with that a little bit. I'm not suggesting I'd go as far as Rob did in some of the conversations, conspiracies that he threw up, but I do think sometimes there is a little bit more to it, and I don't think we're ever going to find that out until he makes his next step, or maybe we never find it out.
I just think, just to put in there, I think with most decisions, when even around players, managers leaving and joining clubs, there's always more that meets the eye, and the deals are a lot of the time done a lot earlier than they're announced. Do you know what I mean? So, I mean, I think that's just the way it is, unless we're actually on the inside, which we're not. Otherwise, if we were, we wouldn't be talking about it. You know what I mean? So I just think that's the way it is. Do you know what I mean? And the most important thing for me now is that we get somebody in, or something's in place for somebody to come in and step up to that role.
For me, Josh, on it, you can always break. There's the idea, I think, if you imagine Michael Edwards' job, and it's very difficult for us to do, not least because Michael himself hasn't talked very much about his job, but people in these positions, firstly, I think they'll get to define their own roles a little bit. I feel like Marcel Brands' job and Michael Edwards' job will have a lot in common, but there'll be a lot of stuff around the periphery where there is quite a difference. But you can look at, for instance, training ground, done. Structure, you'll feel like everyone who's around, and that's done. And everything else then is the transient bit. That will always be. So there'll need to be at some point another manager. There'll need to be at some point a complete renewal of the playing squad. But he's already done one go round of them. And that to me feels like the most obvious thing. Like, well, all you're doing is the bit of your job you've done before really well, I hasten to add, again.
Yeah, he's done the building up from the base, really, hasn't he? He's done the building up from the bottom, because he came in at a time when Liverpool weren't particularly good, and there wasn't all these sort of structures in place, you know, from top to bottom of the club. Things sort of weren't right, and he's been there to oversee quite a lot of that. I know his role has sort of grown down the years, but he has been a part of that rebuild. He's seen the success then of the rebuild, and I suppose once you've been through that, it maybe loses its challenge a little bit to go and do it again. I imagine Jurgen Klopp probably feels similar about, you know, managing Liverpool, is that he doesn't want to leave Liverpool, you know, on their lassies, and like you know, whatever's going to happen next is completely uncertain. He'll want to leave Liverpool in the best possible vein, but he might be thinking, what I don't want to do is have to completely rebuild the squad again and go through all of that, because it's tough and it takes time. And I'm not surprised to hear that Edwards sort of, you know, before he came to Liverpool, so he says, had put the 10-year cap on it, because that's about the length of time really that you can oversee one of these things.
Julian Ward's the replacement. Gordon remains in place. Ian Klopp's now till 2024. That's his contract. I mean, there's nothing to stop Liverpool and Jurgen Klopp coming to an agreement to extend. There's other reasons why that might not happen, but there's nothing to stop that from happening. Feels a little bit like the other part of this for Edwards is, if he's not going to be around in 2024, he almost needs to go now to give Ward the opportunity to properly get his feet under the table. There's no mileage in a 1 year extension for Edwards, which there might be for Klopp in a year's time. In a year's time, if Klopp thought, you know what, I'll put another year extension on, then I've still got 3 years left. And then in a year's time, you put another year on, I've still got 3 years left. I don't think you can do Michael Edwards' job and do that, to be honest with you, in this position.
I agree with you personally.
No, I agree with that. I don't think you can. And I think, some of what you've just said there, Neil, it does kind of make sense from an individual's point of view where he's done 10 years and you might think to yourself, well, can I go again? It's a big job to go again. And he's done probably as much as anyone could have expected, if not more. He's exceeded expectations. I remember, you see some of the narrative now about some of the things that were getting said about Edwards going back before Klopp, and there was that almost,
the air-conditioned room.
Yeah, but there was those relationships where, Brendan Rodgers was there and you could tell it wasn't harmonious. And then I think, the setup that's there now, and Klopp's a big part of that. And I always remember Klopp saying, he's part of the decision process and he'll have the final say as well. I think it's really, really important that the manager gets the final say. It is a harmonious one. You can see that the people involved in that space all do get on. And I think that's why it makes loads of sense that Ward is the successor, because he's obviously lived and breathed it for a number of years. He understands the way of working. I think you're really right to reference some of the infrastructure. And I know Mel went big on this on the conversation you had. That's something that as fans, we probably don't really think about, because all you think about is the ins and the outs. But actually to put an infrastructure in place that's worked so well is testament to the kind of work he's done, and obviously Gordon staying as well. So it's one man at the end of the day, and for me, the most important man in all of this is the manager. And if he was to extend, even if it was for 1 year, then that's significant for me.
The idea that people get on, Jamie, I think that's not the same as people agreeing, and I think that's an important thing. But I know, because I've been there, and you and I have been lucky enough to be around Liverpool during what's been, pretty close to the camp at different times, during what's been a good era. And one of the things that I've noticed is the idea that it is harmonious, that people do get on. And as I say, getting on isn't the same as everyone thinks the same thing. It's not encouraged. I don't think that's the case.
It's about working together, isn't it?
But it's about working together. And I think we've got to see that pretty close up, that in the last few years, certainly from when we could see them, because obviously there's been COVID, but from sort of 2018 to about 2020, one of the things that always struck me was how much everyone gets on together.
Yeah, and I mean, personally, I know that comes from the manager.
Yeah.
A lot of it, it's... I've had conversations with the manager about it. I'm sure you have as well. When you speak to him, I sat in New York with Jürgen and Pep Linders, the three of us on a table, and we were talking about what happened in the fan park that day in Madrid, and what happened in Kiev, the run up to Kiev, what's happened all season with all the stuff, what's happening on the pre-season tour. And he was saying it's amazing to see fans working with, officials at the club, working with other fans then, and his words were, if, managerial staff, non-managerial staff, players, fans, if we all work together, we've got a hell of a more of a chance of being successful, because we don't have, the chic owner of Man City who'll just throw money at any problem. You know what I mean? We the way that FSG like to do things is to work around problems together and put infrastructures in place in order to, negate having to spend a lot of money. But yeah, obviously from the inside, I mean, you've only got to look at from what I see a lot of in my time, travelling with Liverpool and being in that camp, was obviously like the media staff and the sponsorship staff and stuff like that, and the partnership staff, and they're sort the way they all get on, and the way that they all work together, and the way that they make me feel welcomed. The players have got great relationships with them, the manager's got great relationships with them. See, when Jürgen Klopp comes on to the plane before we leave in the airport, I've seen it twice now. He's just come back from holiday. He hasn't seen anyone for a couple of weeks. This is, so to speak, anyone outside Melwood, he hasn't seen them for a bit of a while, and he takes the time to walk around them all and talk to them all, and have a laugh and make sure that everyone's good. And even the camera lads, pulls the camera lads, says, you haven't been eating a lot, you know what I mean? You just wait. You need to eat, you don't look well. Like this is the sort of thing that's going on at the Liverpool Football Club. And slightly off topic, but that's my experience of it. So that's the way that it works. So obviously discussions have been had across the board, and maybe we're talking about Jürgen extending his contract. I used to say that Jürgen hasn't got Pep Linders ready to step in and do it the old Liverpool way. That is the Liverpool way, by the way, the boot room way. Succession, moving up. You've had your turn now. Let someone underneath you go, someone who's been up the same way as you, knows the score. that's what you want at Liverpool, innit? You want people who know the score. You want people who know how it works. You don't want some big high-flying Hollywooder to come in and say, right, no, this is what we're change everything now. You know what I mean? Like, we've already had that change. Now let's just build on the infrastructure that we've built.
That's why Ward's getting it, Josh. And then he says in his little thing, Edwards, the little thing, the 2,000-word letter, he says almost all the contracts are done. Now, you can wonder about that in the context of the biggies. The front three, as have been the front three, are all still outstanding. Now, that obviously now comes with a real hierarchy, if we're all honest about it. You know, Salah's is the main one. We all want Salah's one to be sorted out. So it's still a bit of a big 7 months ahead for him, a big 7 months ahead for Ward. To me, and all this makes me feel as though it is likelier in one sense that Salah's may well be pretty close to being done, because I don't think that they'd want the first thing that happens on Julian Ward's tenure to be, Salah's getting off. Yeah. I don't think that's a move that Liverpool are going to want to make for Julian Ward at this point. So it does make me think that sort of tone, that there maybe is something to come soon, but I could be completely wrong.
No, I think you're probably right. There seems to be just a lot of good planning, doesn't there? And there has been a lot of good planning for many, many years now, and I don't believe that's going to change when Edwards goes either. I believe that, you know, the way he spoke in that letter, I only read a bit of it because it was very long, but I read the bit that Liverpool put in their press release, basically. And what he said in that was sort of like, you know, acknowledge that there is a good team there now, and it's not like he's leaving Liverpool in the lurch. There's going to be others who can make the step up, and it has been a team effort and that kind of thing, and that's the way I think it will continue forward. I think there's a really interesting couple of months coming up for a few contracts. Me and Ian were talking about the lads who have got contracts coming up before the show, and you know, there's like Origi and Milner and stuff on there who are potentially up in the summer by the looks of it. So there's those ones which Liverpool might look to be getting tied up. So maybe the contracts sort of aren't done as Michael Edwards is saying, because one of those ones could sort of spring up last minute, and there could be a little clause in there or something. But like you say, the main ones that you want to see getting done, because he doesn't want to be leaving Julian Ward with the task of letting Mo walk on a free.
This is the really interesting thing, Ian, is that Park, to an extent in different ways, Lovren, Lallana, and in a much bigger scale, Wijnaldum. I think you can make a legitimate point that it's interesting the sporting director is the first significant change from what's been this very successful era for Liverpool ahead of any of the footballers or the manager. That to me does suggest, you know, part of this is to set up a period of renewal, whatever that looks like, but that needs the person. The person who's at the helm of the renewal needs to be at the helm of the renewal for all of it. You don't get to do a bit of renewal, get off and go, crack on now, lads, renew.
Yeah, that's really fair. And I think in terms of the front three, I think it's a tricky one, because in my head, and we did have a little chat before with Andy before the show started, in my head I do think Salah and Mane happens quite soon. The one what I'm not sure about is Firmino's, and I think it becomes difficult because if you're one of the front three and you're maybe the one that doesn't get the contract, then that's a difficult conversation given everything he's done. And listen, all three might get it, but just knowing how the club's worked recently, you can't imagine there's a scenario where all those lads who would have a similar age, Bobby's 30 already, I think Mane's 30 in April, Salah's 30 in June. I don't think they'd be looking to give him 3 big contracts out to those 3 lads. So I think there's going to come a couple of uncomfortable conversations where someone's got to say, listen, we're renewing 2, but the 3rd one isn't happening. And you sense that it was similar for Wijnaldum and Henderson as well. And maybe the managers had to wear his colours to one player and go, well, I'm going to make sure this one gets over the line. I want to keep both of them, but if I've got to keep one and I've got to choose one, then in this instance, I'm choosing the captain, because we know he wanted to keep old Wijnaldum and it didn't happen. And I think there is a thing where they won't want to give out contracts to all these lads who would have a similar age, and I think that's where it becomes difficult when you look at the front three.
I just think it's got to go. I think if they do the talking on the pitch, come between, you know, Salah's contract should already be in place. I think there's a case to be argued for Mane and Firmino to say, look, you want this contract, go and get it. Do you know what I mean? That's what Salah's gone and done. Do you know what I mean? Like, I mean, I would personally, based off, obviously Mo Salah's progression at Liverpool has been phenomenal. Do you know what I mean? Or like, not in terms of numbers, because that first season he put 44 away, but in terms of his general progression as a footballer into the world's elite has been phenomenal. Like, every pre-season he comes back looking like more of an animal. Do you know what I mean? In terms of his physicality and in terms of his technical ability as well. He's one of those players now where, like, he just doesn't give the ball away very much. You know, that was one of his criticisms at the start, was that, he bags a load of goals, but he gives the ball away in the middle of the park 3-4 times over, do you know what I mean, and leaves us exposed. That was happening a lot. Now that doesn't happen, and he's worked his way up into the elite. So for me, not anyone, whether he's 30, you know, look, Cristiano Ronaldo's still doing it 37. If you look after yourself that long, there's still years in the game for you at the end of the day. So for me, Mo Salah, you've earned that contract, son. Yeah, you sign on that dotted line, you get what you want. You turn around to Mane now and Bobby and say, yeah, you've been great servants. Yeah, this is the contract we can offer you because we want to keep you. But if you want that elite contract that Mo Salah's gonna sign, we hope he's gonna sign, then you better go and play for it, because Salah he's played for it, he's earned it. You know what I mean? It's one of those things. That's the way I see it. Liverpool Football Club's a big football club, so if you want to be one of the big players on one of the big contracts, you go and prove that you deserve it, as far as I'm concerned.
Moving on, we've got Gerrard has gone to Aston Villa. Jamie, Ian, Josh, everyone around the table one at a time. What's the extent to which people are bothered's a horrible word to use, like, are you bothered and all that sort of nonsense? That's not what I mean. What I mean is, like, is this the sort of thing that's got you up nights, or almost like, are you just, my position, I just want Stephen to do well and be happy.
I'm the exact same. I mean, Stevie's obviously every kid from my generation, and probably the generation a little bit above, do you know what I mean? He was the hero, he was the man every kid wanted to be on the streets, the man every kid had on the back of his shirt. He was me, I was 10 in the 05, he's me hero. So, yeah, you know, everyone wants to see him at Liverpool one day in the dugout. Gerrard wants to see himself in the dugout one day at Liverpool. He's made he hasn't been shy about that, you know what I mean? He said that even when he's been at Rangers, do you know what I mean? And won leagues with Rangers. But, yeah, for me, you want him to do well. And, you know, he's proved he can do the Scottish thing now. Done a great thing with Rangers. Won the league with them after, you know, them being where they were. I don't think they could ever ask to do better in Europe in the current climate of football at the minute. So yeah, the natural step up now is go to a team like, you know, you don't want him go. You know, he's not going to want to go to a sinking ship. You know what I mean? Like, he wants to go to a team with a good fan base. That's what he's always played with. That's what he's always managed with going to Rangers. And he wants it with a bit of money to spend, and decent facilities, and, you know, I think the thing is for him, if he gets Villa into the top 6. Top 4. You know, top 4's a push, but top 6 wins a domestic trophy with them of some sort. Then, you know, 6 years down the line, 5 years down the line, is he a Liverpool manager? I'd give him a go.
I think it's a good move for him. I think in an ideal world, he probably would have liked it to have maybe come at the end of the season if he could have put one more title in the bag for Rangers. I think that would have been a thing for him. He'd have been conscious of not wanting to tarnish the relationship a little bit, but that's just an inevitable thing. You know, these jobs come when they come, and he couldn't turn it down. And I think, you know, Stephen will have sat and thought about what will it take to get to the Liverpool job. And there's no doubt, you know, performing to a good level in the Premier League, being under a microscope is a thing. He'll know that if he performs in the Premier League, and you can have a conversation about what does he need to do, because manager of Aston Villa, there's only certain things you can do. He's not going to win the league. He's not going to go and win the Champions League. Those things aren't going to happen. But can he get a team who are a good team, slightly underperforming, got good players, decent backing? Can he get them in and around that 6th to 4th position? That is good. That's outstanding if you're Steven Gerrard. You know, it's been a long time since Villa have been at that kind of level, eating at that table.
So it's Europa League.
Possibly. I think it's difficult because I think
it's difficult for everyone, you know what I mean? But the point is, the minute Leicester are probably 2nd or 3rd. I mean, before the Champions League teams drop down, Leicester and West Ham are 2nd, 3rd favourites to win the. Like, if you qualify for the Europa League as one of the English teams, you'll probably be one of the sides with the biggest budgets.
You probably are, but I think there's also something around having a bit of nous in Europe, and I think it'll take Aston Villa. Don't get me wrong, sometimes it can just work for you, and the path you get, and it all just kind of aligns. But I think it will take a little bit of time if he does get into Europe to almost, you know, for those players to kind of understand what it takes to go Thursday, Sunday, all that. Obviously, Gerrard knows, he's been doing it up in Rangers. And he's done a good job. You know, people will play down the job a little bit because there is only one title in 3 years. But from where they were when he took over, it's an outstanding job. And as I say, stopping Celtic, that's a huge, significant thing. And listen, taking the Aston Villa job doesn't necessarily mean he gets to have a go with the Liverpool one, because you can't be handing these kind of managerial positions out. He's got to have to earn it. He's going to have to go and perform. You've got to take sentiment out of this. I said on the show, I get a little bit nervous when we have the Gerrard and Pep Lijnders conversation, because it almost feels like a lot of people are just accepting that it'll be one of them two. They may not be in a position to take that role when Jurgen decides to call it a day, and it might be 2024. It has to be the best person for the job, and you don't know who's going to be about in 2 or 3 years' time. There could be someone else out there who's doing really, really well, and unfortunately, Gerrard might be doing well at Villa, but he might need another step before he can go to the Liverpool job.
Yeah, he needs to earn it on merit, doesn't he? I think that's what we all want to see. Like,
That's what he wants.
Exactly. Yeah. He's said that from the very start. Yeah, he doesn't want any handouts, and he wouldn't want to come to Liverpool in a sort of bad way. I don't think either, in terms of the Liverpool as a club being in a bad way. He'd want to come when we are in a relatively good way, and he's in a good way, and we can sort of ride the crest of that wave together. Because ultimately, the one thing he want to do more than anything is win a league title with Liverpool, won't he? So he'll want us to be challenging for that. And the expectations at Villa at the moment don't feel like they're that large. Dean Smith, isn't it? Yeah, released his statement through the LMA saying, he thought they could have finished in the top 10 this season. So that must have been the expectation for Villa, was just finishing the top 10, and they finished like 11th last season. So it's not a huge leap for Gerrard to achieve that with this squad and the players they've got, and also the budget they've got. Really, one of the key things I think for Gerrard, for himself, Jamie, is I think it's inevitable. I don't think it's inevitable, but if he gets the Liverpool job, the idea of him failing would be awful to him. So he's got to get himself ready. This is why I think this is a really, I think we see this all as like this one-way journey where Gerrard's got to prove himself to get some sort of moment where he can be offered the Liverpool job and then he can take it. The prize for Stephen's not becoming Liverpool manager. The prize for Stephen's winning things while being Liverpool manager. So he's got to get himself ready. He's got to develop, and he'll know that more than we do, more than anyone does.
Yeah, look, Gerrard as a player, he held himself to the highest of standards. Do you know what I mean? He often talks about that. He wants to be the best of the best. He's a champion. He's a competitor. Do you know what I mean? So he's not going to want to come to, like you just said, Neil. He's not going to come to his boyhood club just to be there and say, "Oh, isn't this great?" He's already been there. Do you know what I mean? He's a king. So be a king as a player. You want to come back and be a king as a manager. Since it's only really Dalglish who's done that for Liverpool. Do you know what I mean? It's a big legacy to fulfill. And yeah, like Neil, I agree with Neil on that whole point. Really, I think he's not soft. I think if no one's soft, he's less soft than anyone talking about this. Do you know what I mean? Trying to get my words out there. Like, he knows the score. He looks at Jurgen Klopp. He knows he's one of the best managers in the world. He knows he's got to emulate those sort of footsteps in order to be talked about as one of the greatest.
All these fellas, Ian, not all of them, because I think we can actually now have an awareness of the ones of whom this isn't true. But these fellas who are now really good at this job, to me, they look like they see themselves as constantly developing, constantly learning from other people anyway. You look at the way Guardiola and Klopp talk about each other, the way Klopp talked about Graham Potter before we played Brighton, even a less successful manager, but the trajectory of someone like David Moyes' career. It suggests that all these fellas who are currently good at this, not just in this country but around the world, they're constantly learning and developing. And I see no reason why Stephen wouldn't be different. And for me, that's almost the most important thing. This is, if his home is eventually to be here, Klopp had done 14 years before he turns up at Liverpool, and he's a different manager now to the one that left Dortmund, and he'd say that himself. And to me, that's what these people are now like. This is the way they view themselves, the way they address themselves, the way they carry themselves. Those who are good, those who've become less good are those like Mourinho. We were great in 2005 and have kept trying to play the same tricks.
Yeah, and someone like Jose, he's not really evolved, I think, is what people would say when they put the finger. He was great for a period of time, a long period of time, by the way, but then things change, and maybe he's not changed with those times. But I think sometimes we'll talk about, and we'll do it with players as well sometimes, but certainly with managers, where we don't appreciate that they can have a bad experience and they can learn and they can take that experience and then make themselves better and go on a bit of a journey, and that's also fine. You might not always nail every single opportunity, and we have to accept that. I think with Gerrard as well, there'll be something around. I think they'll like it. Liverpool's hierarchy will like the fact that he's in the Premier League. I think they'll like to see how that works for him. How does he react if he gets 2 or 3 bad ones on the spin? What does that look like for Steven Gerrard? Does he come out all guns blazing? How is he going to react to something like that, to a bit of adversity? And he can talk about Scotland, but we know those moments don't come as often because you're talking about 2 teams in this league. It is ultra competitive every single week. So I'm intrigued to see how he manages it. I'm intrigued to see what happens on December the 11th when he comes to Anfield, because that is a game that's full of intrigue, because you want to see what's he like on the touchline next to Jurgen Klopp and all that kind of thing. How's that dynamic? Because Gerrard's a winner, so he'll park that, I'm sure. But you kind of
they'll have a row with each other and the press will go berserk about it.
Absolutely, there will be something. And I know the Lampard thing's reared its head recently, and I think the thing with Lampard and the Chelsea thing, you can't blame him for taking the opportunity, even though he'll probably accept himself privately that he wasn't ready for that job. It came too soon for him. And sometimes these opportunities just come when they come, and you've got to either take them or turn them down. How many people are going to turn them down? Not many. You end up taking it. And if Gerrard's probably, I don't know, sitting, having a conversation with himself, he's probably thinking, Neil, along the lines of what you just said there, you know, Klopp gets it 13, 14 years after being a manager. That's probably ideal. But we know sometimes it'll just happen when it happens. You know, could he then do the Villa job and then maybe go abroad and then come back? Possibly. That could be like the perfect scenario. But again, you can't pick and choose. I think there's loads and loads of intrigue in this. And I hope it works for Stephen at Villa. And I hope he is successful. And I think, you know, he's not soft. He's surrounded himself with people that he knows and he believes in and he's got faith in, which is the right thing to do. I do wonder whether he might tweak it, his staff a little bit as he settles into the role and gives himself a little bit more experience and stuff. So I think he might do something along those lines. But he's got all the things you'd want to see in a manager. I was always been impressed with how he's handled himself with the media up in Scotland. And sometimes I think there is a line where he looks like he might cross it a little bit because he is very front foot. He is very aggressive with the press.
I like that about him.
I don't know whether he can always get away with it. And I think if there are one or two bad defeats, it'll be interesting to see how he reacts. But there's no doubt, I mean, in a perfect world, you'd love to see Gerrard managing Liverpool Football Club and doing it to a level where we're all successful. But as I said at the very start of this, it's got to be right for us. It's got to be right for him. And there's no gimmies here. You've got to go and fucking earn it.
Yeah, of course. There is, moving along, there is, I just want to give a shout out to, we'll have a free show about the women's team. We've got a great result, and it was a truly great result. It was an excellent performance at Durham, won 2-0 Sunday lunchtime. Much the better side, very, very aggressive from Liverpool women throughout. Durham are a physical side, and Liverpool took absolutely no messing them and put themselves about brilliantly. So we'll have a show about where the women are up to in general across the course of the season, but it'll be focusing on that great victory. That'll be coming out for free tomorrow. Also, it's nice to have Jamie in selling out massive arenas. I mean, this is the smallest room you've played in ages.
Yeah, no, it's going good at the minute. Obviously, the tour starts at the end of the month.
Yep.
And first night to sell out in Glasgow, second night's in sell out in Newcastle, and these are all over 1,000 caps now. And like, I think Leeds is the slowest moving, and I think there's about just over 100 left. I think the only ones with tickets left are Leeds, Manchester, Dublin and Cardiff. Now, Dublin, I'm told, could have very close to have gone over the weekend. Manchester, there's 100 tickets left, and it's doing at least 70 tickets a week for the past couple of months, so that's going to go. I think Cardiff, we're about 80 away, we're going to go. So yeah, I'm proper looking forward to getting down. Obviously, this is my first tour without Liverpool songs, my first full whack tour, you know, after the album, since the album coming out nearly 2 years ago, whatever. But you know, like, so I'm proper excited to see how it's going to be around the country, you know, how the songs are received. So thanks to everyone who's bought a ticket. And yeah, we've obviously got the M&S Bank Arena next November. The standing's nearly gone, so if you're a fan of mine and you're listening to this and you haven't got one, get on it quick. And yeah, if there are any people who'd like to bring the kids, you know, the seating areas, it's any age really, you know what I mean. If you've got a 2-year-old who's a bit of a rocker, you know what I mean, bring them down.
Excellent news for the 2-year-olds listening to the Anfield Wrap. Sorry about the language as ever. We will crack on with where we find ourselves coming up with the game against Arsenal. Seasons under Klopp, I've always been intrigued by Ian. He comes in October 15-16, and I always remember like the interviews he was given by the time he got to January of 2016. Like, you people are insane. These matches don't stop. I've never known anything like it in my life. He couldn't believe the League Cup semi-final was 2 legs. He was like, this is berserk. Made no sense to him at all. But then from there, what I think you've always seen is Liverpool. You know, even last season when we were wobbly with the centre-half question, we don't lose a game between the third round of the FA Cup and the November international break. We don't lose a game in that run. We draw too many, don't get me wrong, but we don't lose a game. And in all these other seasons that I've got in front, I've got the table for it. So everyone is able to look at the tables from 2016 onwards and up to last season. They're all in front of everyone. And we were all in different places at different times, but in all of these instances, Liverpool kick on in the run of games that follows these. Now in 1920 we kick on from a position of being 6 points clear, and that's before we play Manchester City the following week at Anfield. That was the 11th game going into the 12th that year. But you take me sort of general point. In all of these, at this point onwards, Liverpool find themselves and go on a bit of a run. To me, the one that this season feels most similar to is 16-17, when Liverpool were actually top at this stage with 26 points, Chelsea 25, City 24, Arsenal 24, Tottenham 21. And what's about to happen is that Chelsea are about to go on that mad run under Antonio Conte. For me, this feels a bit like that season where it's all a bit nip and tuck at this stage, but it wouldn't surprise me if one way or another it looks quite different by mid-January.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, you know, kind of back in the day, people would always say, well, I wouldn't even look at the table till at least 10 games have been played. So I think it is still very, very early days. And, you know, looking at some of those tables now, you do forget, you know, that Chelsea one you reference, I think on the back of is it a defeat at Arsenal, and he just changes the formation. I think they
beat them and Arsenal
next.
beat them, and then
they go and play Hall and they get a result, and then they don't look back from there. And he tweaks the formation, and you know they kick on. I think this is a hugely important time over that Christmas period, because you can suddenly start to see teams just leap at 3 or 4 places up, because you get that momentum, you get that run of games. And Liverpool have notoriously, as you said, Neil, have been really, really good. And the manager comes in that kind of early period, and it does take a little bit of getting used to. And I was talking about that before, about Gerrard. You've got to get used to your surroundings. You've got to get used to what you're working with and stuff. And it took Jurgen a little bit of time, but he certainly found his feet, and he certainly understands what you need to do to get through Christmas and for it to be successful. I'm looking forward to this period massively, because I think it's great as a fan anyway, because there's loads and loads of games coming up. But after this period, you know where you are. You've got a really, really strong idea whether you're in a title challenge or whether it was just a load of kind of, smoking dreams, really, and you're never going to actually be involved in anything significant. But I've got every faith that if we keep some of the main lads fit, and I think that's a thing. I think, Henderson's come back from international duty. It sounds like he's picked up an injury. We don't know what it is yet. That's the only worry for me, really. Have Liverpool got the strength and depth to be able to navigate some of these fixtures, because they really come thick and fast now?
It's a bit of a strange situation for me, Jamie, where Chelsea are the champions of Europe, City are the reigning champions of the country, Liverpool the last champions in front of crowds, which I do think is a thing, and I think it's a valid point to make. But we're in a bit of a strange situation where I don't think any of Liverpool, City and Chelsea are really scared of the others. And I don't think that they're really scared of us. Don't get me wrong. I don't think this is like... I think it's a strange little moment. Whereas, if you go back to 17-18, for instance, City have taken 28 points from the first 10 at that sort of stage. If you look at even 18-19, Liverpool and City, they know that it's Liverpool versus City by this point. 19-20, Liverpool have only dropped points in one game by this stage.
It was ours,
we knew that we were absolutely going for it, and everyone else knew it. What I think is interesting is there's probably a little bit of a... There's still a little bit of a phony war, I think, where I don't know if Chelsea know who their main rivals will be, or even if they're involved. City may be the same, us the same.
Yeah, I mean, it's a very, very, like you say, it's a very sort of puddling predicament that we find ourselves in terms of, like, just, you look at the teams now, and, there was a couple of weeks ago where I was saying, I can't see Chelsea dropping points, before they had dropped points, and then all of a sudden, there's a game against Burnley, and then there's this and that, and you think, oh, hang on a minute, they don't look that good a side, actually. Say, you look at Man City, the score with City, they play great attacking football, they can't defend. The thing is with us, what's always been, it's been similar, you know what I mean? It's been so, but obviously over the last 2-3 seasons, our defence has shored up. But I just think we do look a little bit frail in terms of the midfield, like you touched on, strength and depth in the midfield. So whereas most seasons I'd look at it and go, yeah, we're great this period under Klopp, we go for it, blah, blah, blah. But looking at it now, like with the midfield, you are a bit worried. And I think a lot more worried than you have been in previous seasons, I suppose.
What I think is interesting is how us and City have flipped a little bit in what Jamie's saying there, that in the seasons gone past 18-19, 19-20, we've done a bit of, well, they attack really well, but they look a bit frail. At the minute, I think they look a bit boring. They're actually uninspiring against Crystal Palace at home. They're uninspiring against Southampton. In their first shot against Southampton in injury time, when they drop points at home against Southampton, that's the first shot on target, is in injury time of the game. So I think it's an interesting little flip that at the minute, City, they look like the more solid outfit. Liverpool look a little bit more frail, but Liverpool look like they're attacking a lot better and look much more likely to score goals. And it's interesting that that's now gone the other way around, Josh, and that to me is where That's where I rate City. I think City are going to be really, really hard to beat. I think if we're hard to beat and we've got all of our other qualities, then I think I'd make us favourites. But it's the idea of being really hard to beat and not conceding soft goals like we have.
Yeah, their Brighton game gave me deja vu as a Liverpool supporter as well, where you twat them everywhere first half and then just completely sit back the whole second half. It reminded me of the sort of 16, 17 days, as you point out here. But it's a dead weird season, this one, I think, because every season we'll try and sort of find the silver bullet, won't we? Every season we'll try and figure out who is the sort of real title challenger from the pack. Well, there'll be a team who sort of makes signs early on. And I think each of the top three teams has made those kind of signs early on. There's problems for each of them on paper. You know, City, you look at them and say they've not got a natural goal scorer. Chelsea have maybe not got such a problem on paper, although Lukaku, the Lukaku thing has sort of not gone probably as well as they've hoped so far. He had a bit of a goal drought, didn't he, and then got injured. Liverpool probably don't have many problems on paper, but you can't stop lads getting injured. So it can still sort of go any which way. I think Chelsea would be the one who you'd say on paper does have the least weaknesses, probably. But this is where you sort of
you can't win a league with Reece James as your top scorer. I won't stand for it.
Exactly, and this is sort of the issue. Really, is where it all comes out in the wash. And this is what I think you were saying before: is that the wash is effectively this run now up until January, because the games come thick and fast. You have to sort of deal with lulls and things like that in your squad in terms of injuries, in terms of general fitness and fatigue is going to be managed, having to make change within this time, and that's where I think it would be dead interesting to see sort of what goes on. Pep Guardiola's obviously shown he's a manager who's not afraid to change things, whereas Tuchel has been someone who's sort of stuck with a more solid 11, and Jurgen Klopp we know sort of tends to stick with a solid 11, but is not afraid of making changes, sort of horses for courses. So I think it's going to be a dead interesting run, and I think as you said before, this is where you'll probably see one of them break away.
All three of you, who do you think is better, City or Chelsea?
This season, Chelsea.
I think City are the better team.
I think City are the better team.
Do you think they'll finish ahead of Chelsea?
Yeah.
No.
That was my... Yeah, that was what I was sort of driving at, really, is I like if they were... I think when for instance, when City go to Stamford Bridge, they played them off the park. Yeah. But I don't see Chelsea dropping daft points to Crystal Palace at home. In fact, they literally didn't. First game of the season, they beat them 3-0. We beat them 3-0.
Chelsea will do more than enough to win more than enough games to have themselves right up there, and City ultimately won't, which is mad because they probably are the best side in the league.
That's the argument then. They're not the best side, are they? Because the best side in the league at the end of the day wins the league.
100%.
It's over. It's you talk about against each other. Playing against, like Neil's saying. They might be a bit on that day. 11 versus 11, so you probably back City to come out on top, but you don't look at teams by one game, you look at teams on 38 games. 100%. And right now I'd say Chelsea are the team to knock off the pitch. They are the team to knock off the pitch, but in terms of the performances, like the steadiness that we've seen, they haven't dropped too many points, do you know what I mean? And that's what it comes down to. The best team at Anfield this season, I think City come and give us a good game in the first half, but Chelsea were brilliant until they lost a man, and even when they lost a man, we couldn't break them down. Do you know what I mean? I think City go down 10 men, we kill them.
Steadiness, I think, is the key thing here. In that, I think at the minute Chelsea, and it could be partially a little bit fixtures in. I think Chelsea looks steadier than City or Liverpool. I feel like City or Liverpool are more likely to go on a mad win 11 out of 11 run if it all clicks. Basically, if the team that wins the league wins it with 86 points, I think it's probably Chelsea. If the team that wins the league breaks 90, it's Liverpool or City. I still think that, even though Liverpool would have to put one hell of a run together. Well, both sides would, but I feel like Chelsea will be the steady Eddies, just pretty much picking up the points, you'd think.
Yeah, possibly. I'm not sure anyone breaks 90, if I'm being honest. I think it's difficult because, depending on which week you're talking about, it can change. So, when City goes to Stamford Bridge and they put that performance on, no one's sitting here saying Chelsea are better than City. No one is, because it ends up being 1-0. It could have been 5. They absolutely just toy with them for kind of 90 minutes, really, and Chelsea can't get out. I think Chelsea are a very good side, and I think they've had a really nice run of fixtures recently, and I think they've benefited from when they've lost players, key players like Lukaku. It's come at a time when they can manage it, because they're up against teams where they only probably need one goal. And don't get me wrong, defensively they've been brilliant, and the keeper's been brilliant, and he's pulled it out the bag a few times. Brentford away being a really good example where Chelsea probably fold if they haven't got him in goal that day, and he just performs 9 out of 10 stuff. City, I think, may go and do something in January, because I think this centre forward thing could kill them. There's no doubt a lot of times in a lot of games they'll destroy teams 4 or 5-0. No problem at all. It'll just click. It won't click all the time. And I think if Guardiola's got any kind of want of maybe trying to win a Champions League, I think he'll know. Now, it's whether you can get a centre forward in January that can go and do that for you. But I think he'll know in those big games, in key moments, which is why for Harry Kane, he'll need a centre forward. And you've already seen it in games this season where without that lethal number 9, it's just cost them points. It'll definitely cost them in the Champions League because there'll be games where it is that tight. You have got to have someone whose job it is to put the ball in the net more often than not. And don't get me wrong, they've got people like Jesus who's playing out wide a little bit at the minute, and he's a centre forward by trade, but he's not a guy who's probably going to give you, well, he certainly isn't going to give you kind of 25 goals a season. So I wouldn't be surprised, Neil, if City go and do something in January. But I don't think there'll be much in it in terms of those 3 teams. I think you will see a really tight race. And Josh said before, you might see one pull away. I think you'll have this where it's just chopping and changing right through to maybe March, April time.
For us, Josh, I'm loath to say it, not least because 2 of them were on the pitch against West Ham, but for me, it does feel as though Liverpool could do with quite consistently having at least 2 of Fabinho, Thiago and Henderson on the pitch. Possibly, given his performances up to the injury, you can maybe throw Keita in there as well and say 3 from that 4 on a regular basis would help Liverpool in terms of stability. For me, it is going to be the thing that underpins. I think this is a big run of games coming up for Fabinho and for Thiago, both of whom are part of the big run of games when we get to the end of last season. And with Phillips and Williams at centre-half, go 10 unbeaten. I think if Liverpool can have Van Dijk and Gomez, or Van Dijk and Canate, or Van Dijk and Matip, or Gomez and Matip at centre-half, and have Fabinho, Thiago and Henderson in front of them, there's nothing to stop this Liverpool team being able to really go for it.
Yeah, this is the sort of, I suppose, tough spell for Liverpool now in terms of the injury issues that we've been seeing. I think it's time for Thiago now to sort of put his injury issues to one side. I know it's not literally on him to do that. It's obviously a luck thing, but it's time for him to get a bit of a run in the side now and show that
he does have in the second half of last season.
Yeah, he does. Yeah, and he showed some steel during that as well. So what I'm about to say sounds sort of harsh, but I think he needs to show some steel within this run as well, because there's going to be loads of different types of games, and it's not all going to particularly suit Thiago. But I think there'll be a lot of games where we just have to call on Thiago because he's potentially one of the only options, or he's just the best footballer of the options that we do have, and that's why I think you should hopefully see a lot of him going forward. I quite like Jurgen to stop changing the centre halves in the league now as well. I think we sort of enjoyed having the centre halves to be able to rotate in the first part of the season, and look, I still want to see bits of Gomez and Canate and Matip and all sort of interchanging in cup competitions in the Champions League. Now that's a dead rubber in the group stage, but I think we probably need to start seeing a solid centre half partnership. Who that is, Jurgen is a much better man to decide than I am on that. But I think that's where you start to need the stability. We want to see Fabinho playing in front of sort of the same back 4, because that was the recipe which has won us the league. It's the recipe which has seen us have so much success down the years, was a solid back 4, and was Fabinho in front of that. And then, like you say, keeping sort of one of Henderson, Thiago, Keita of the other 2 fit beyond that would do for me, I think.
Tight wins would be no bad thing for Liverpool. Don't get me wrong, if you offer me right now they go and smash Arsenal 5-0 first game back, I'd go great. Yeah. But I think there'd be nothing wrong with them getting a little run where Liverpool by 1 goal, 1-0 Liverpool, 2-1 Liverpool, a bit of that would be no bad thing, Jamie.
No, definitely not, and we're going to get that through having, I think the most important thing is that midfield. It's keeping it, like you said there, fitness it's a luck thing, isn't it? Thiago's only ever played 17 games. That's the most number of games he's ever played in one competitive season. I don't know whether that's league games or league games. 17 league games, so it's just under half, right? So we're going to have to face that he's probably, if we get him, it's probably going to be for a 10-game spell. So whenever that is, who knows? But I think it's...
I'd like the next 10.
Yeah, I'd like it to be the next 10. Fingers crossed. That's the most important thing. Fabinho, Thiago and Henderson playing week in, week out for me. Getting that understanding, knowing the roles, putting a sort of partnership together, which then makes teams think about our midfield rather than just the front. Let's give them more to think. Teams come to Anfield now, play Liverpool, they think we stop the front 3. It's jobs are good and really, you know what I mean. But let's, that midfield 3 have the potential to be, on the day the best in the league. I think the centre half thing, I think it is. I think he got it wrong against Brighton. I think it should have been Matip. I think that was a game where we were going to have more of the ball. Joel Matip's the perfect man for that. The way he steps out, you know, he's reassuring on the ball. I think Konate was the wrong choice. I think obviously proven that Konate was the right choice for Man United because it was the aerial, physical, pace battle against Cristiano Ronaldo, which he had him off all game. So I think he's got the luxury now with the centre halves to look at what we're playing against and say, right, you're the man for that one. Obviously, it's inevitable that Van Dijk's going to be there because he's the leader. And I think as long as Van Dijk is the leader, he's the mouth, he'll keep the rest of them shored up. I think, obviously, he's not quite back to the 100% Virgil van Dijk, but he's getting there. You know, he's getting there. Not every game's going to be an unbelievable performance, but he's getting there. His mouth is the biggest thing, his mouth and his leadership. Put him alongside Matip, for me, is the number one choice. I don't think many people could argue with that. But, you know, certain games when you're playing against big physical sides, you know, in the air, Konate's the dominant force. And I think if that's what the opposition's plan A is, then, yeah, Konate comes in. But midfield three, got to try. You say keep them fit, wrap them in cotton wool. You want them to play football. And Thiago, as a player, he's quite a fiery player. He does like to get stuck in a lot of the time late. But he does like to get. So that's where he's going to pick up injuries. But for now, we just need a good first game back against Arsenal, just steady nerves, and then we build on it. Then we keep the same team. Infrastructure at the end of the day. We spoke about at the start of the pod. That's what we need to build on now.
Thank you very much indeed to Jamie Webster, to Ian Ryan, and to Josh Sexton to be in the Anfield Wrap. Do check out everything we've got going on Tour Player. Do download the app, play around with it. You get some tokens, loads and loads of good stuff. Is there something coming out this week that I can talk about or not? I'm not allowed to talk about it yet.
You can talk a bit about it, I think. Yeah.
So the Mo Salah player profiles.
The Mo Salah player profiles coming out for free this week. Well, that came out free last week.
Sorry, that came out
the
free
Virgil
last
van
week.
Dijk player profiles coming out this week. Yeah, we mentioned that in the Mo Salah one, so you're all right.
Marvellous, okie dokie. So the Virgil van Dijk one did come out last week. I got them confused there. The Mo Salah one did come out last week for free. This week, coming, the Virgil van Dijk one is out. It is the absolute business from the Anfield. That was smooth, wasn't it, Josh? Tell you what, there'll be no stopping these subscriber numbers from here. Thank you very much again, Jamie, Ian and Josh, Andy, for producing. It is the Anfield Wrap. The professionalism is endless.